It starts the way most ordinary days do. A tiffin packed, a train caught, a man walking the same route he had walked 1,000 times before, with no reason to believe today would be any different. Jagdish was not a man chasing something extraordinary. He had a job to get to and people at home who were counting on him to come back. September 29th, 2004. He stepped off the train at Okla station alongside his colleague Jitendra. The same platform, the same crowd, the same goodbye they had exchanged countless mornings before. The two men parted ways. Jagdish never made it to work. His body was found in a park near the Lotus Temple. 6 stab wounds, a pool of blood on the ground beneath him, and silence. Because nobody, it seemed, had heard a thing. When investigators arrived at the scene, they found something that should have made the case simple. Instead, it made it impossible to look away from. His wallet was still in his pocket. His watch was still on his wrist. His tiffin was still sitting in his bag. 10 rupees untouched. If this was a robbery, it was a robbery where nothing was taken. So why was he killed? For 3 weeks, that question sat with no answer. Jagdish's family waited by a phone that didn't ring with news. The investigation stalled, and the case, like so many others, began to go cold. Then a man named Srichand came forward. He told police that on the morning of the murder, he had been out exercising near the crime scene and that he had noticed a group of suspicious young men in the area. And then he said something that changed everything. He told them that he had just seen those same men again, right now, right nearby. Police moved fast. 4 men were arrested within days: Wazid, Amit, Mobin, and Vishal. What came next looked on paper like an open and shut case. A gold chain was recovered from Wazid, allegedly stolen off Jagdish's body. An FM radio was found on Mobin, allegedly his too. A knife was recovered during the arrest. A second knife was dug out of the ground after one of the accused led police to where it had been buried. And then came the piece of evidence that seemed to settle it for good. A blood-stained shirt found hanging outside Wazid's family home in a village hundreds of kilometers away in Uttar Pradesh. A witness, weapons, stolen property, blood on a shirt. For a father who had spent 3 weeks not knowing who took his son from him, this must have felt like the moment justice finally arrived. It wasn't. The person to fail Jagdish wasn't one of the accused. It was the prosecution's own witness. When Srichand finally took the stand, his story began to change shape. Details he claimed to remember, details that should have been written down on the very day of the murder, were missing entirely from the official police records. They surfaced for the first time years later, inside a courtroom, with no paper trail behind them. The judge noticed, the defense noticed, and eventually the prosecution had no choice but to do something prosecutors never want to do: declare their own witness hostile. The one man who was supposed to speak for Jagdish in that courtroom had become someone the court could no longer trust. But there was still the physical evidence. Surely that would hold. It didn't. Knives recovered from the accused were never sent to a forensic laboratory. No blood testing, no scientific confirmation that these were the weapons that ended Jagdish's life. The doctor who had examined his wounds drew sketches of what the murder weapons might have looked like. When the judge later compared those sketches to the ones drawn by the investigating officer, the measurements didn't match. These may not have even been the same knives. Then there was the shirt. Blood stained, yes, but it had been left hanging in an open, accessible location for over 3 weeks. Anyone could have touched it, anyone could have planted it. And when the witnesses were asked simple, basic questions: which day police actually went to the village? Who was present when the shirt was recovered? The answers didn't match. The paperwork didn't line up either. A blood-stained shirt with no reliable chain of custody isn't evidence. It's a question mark. Then came a mistake that is almost painful to read. Before the official identification process even began, police had already shown Jagdish's father the gold chain and the FM radio. He looked at them. Later, during the formal identification, he confirmed they belonged to his son. Stop and think about what that actually means. Imagine being shown the answers to an exam before you sit it. When you get every question right, are you proving what you know or simply repeating what you were just told? That identification meant nothing in the eyes of law. The moment police showed him those items beforehand, it became legally worthless. A man who had already lost his son was now, without even realizing it, being failed a second time by the very investigation meant to bring him answers. One opportunity remained: forensic science. Unlike human witnesses, evidence in a lab doesn't forget, it doesn't change its story, it doesn't turn hostile under cross examination. If the forensic reports had been properly presented in court, they might have rescued the entire case. The forensic scientist never appeared. The reports existed, the science behind them existed, but under Indian law, as in most legal systems, a document only becomes evidence once the person who authored it stands in court and can be questioned on it. Without that, it's just a paper. 6 years of trial, and the one piece of evidence that could have spoken for Jagdish with absolute certainty was never properly heard. On August 18, 2010, the court acquitted all four accused, not because they were proven innocent. The judge was careful to note that the prosecution's version of events might well be true, but in a criminal court, might be true has never been enough. The burden is to prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt, and on evidence riddled with contradictions, broken procedure, and missteps, the prosecution simply could not clear that bar. Jagdish's father walked out of that courtroom the same way he had walked in 6 years earlier. No answer, no justice. Nothing but the memory of a son who packed his tiffin, caught his train, and never came home. And that is where the real lesson of this case lives. Not in legal principle, not in courtroom procedure, in the unbearable ordinariness of the failures that destroyed it. A witness statement that wasn't recorded properly on the right day, knives that were never sent for testing, stolen items shown to a witness before the identification even took place, a scientist who simply never showed up. None of these were elaborate conspiracies. None of them required extraordinary effort to avoid. They were basic steps, the kind that exist precisely because a murder victim deserves more than a careless investigation. Justice doesn't only fail when someone covers up the truth. Sometimes it fails because someone simply couldn't be bothered to prove it. And somewhere, a family is still living with that failure. That is the part that should stay with you.